Hi, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to BEaTS Research Radio, a podcast and YouTube channel dedicated to bringing our community closer to research in the science and engineering fields. I'm Nicole Chu, and I'll be your host on BEaTS Research Radio's very first panel discussion. Today, we'll be discussing the importance of advocacy for equality, diversity, and inclusion in the science, technology, engineering, and math fields. I'm incredibly excited to introduce our very special guests who are forging paths to improve and advocate for EDI and STEM. Our guests today are Dr. Edna-Matta Camacho, a scientific evaluator for Health Canada. Dr. Matta Camacho is the founder of STEM Sin Fronteras, an initiative dedicated to advocating for STEM education and female empowerment in Colombia. She is also a leader in the Immigrant and International Women's in Science branch of Ottawa. We are also delighted to welcome Dr. Mateja Šajna, a professor with the University of Ottawa's Mathematics Department. She has supervised multiple graduate students throughout their studies and has been an instrumental driver for her current student, Masoomeh's PhD studies. Our next guest is Masoomeh Akbari, an international student currently pursuing a PhD with the Department of Mathematics at the University of Ottawa and former Afghan refugee from Iran. Thank you so much for joining us here on BEaTS Research Radio. So I'd like to start off our conversation by first asking the first question. What were some of the unique challenges that brought you all here today? And what were the unique challenges that you guys faced on your journey? So without further ado, Dr. Matta Camacho, would you like to start us off?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Nicole, for this great invitation, and the whole team. For me, it's an honor to be here today with you and our panelists to be able to share our experiences and our views in this very important topic. Well, some of my challenges that actually when I started in my career path were first when I went out from my country, when I am originally from Colombia. So when I came the first time, or I went the first time to Mexico, it was starting from zero in a new country with no friends, no family, and no social support. There were very, very difficult times. I didn't even know what to do, but it was very good that I had people from the lab that I was building little by little, day by day, experiences, friends, and it was a learning and improvement every single day. And that was something that I saw. I saw the improvement, and that helped me to keep going, and that definitely I advise people that is going into this transition that to open and to talk to people, exchange ideas, and build a network helps a lot in these transitions when you are new in a new country. And other challenge that I faced was the language. It took me a long time to understand at a grade level conversations in English and what people was telling me. And in that sense, something that helped me was the double check. I always wanted to double check in my own words if what people was telling me was well understood. So in that case, I know that everything I will do it like in the right focus at least. So because it was a fear at the time, like, did I understand this right, or I misunderstood this? So that was something that helped me. And now during the pandemic, something that has been very challenging as well is the life-work balance. It has been kind of overwhelming, very challenging, which is the works and kids at home. Actually, I have to be careful because at work people have been very flexible, very understandable, but having the kids here at home has been a little bit stressed, a little bit challenging to get into the routine for their classes, for their things. So it has been very hard. So those are more or less the challenges that I have been facing during my professional path, and I'm still facing now.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you for sharing those. And Dr. Šajna, would you like to go ahead next?
Sure, thank you. So as a student, I would say that I am not aware that I was ever discriminated against for any reason whatsoever. And I think that my studies were all went pretty smoothly, and I always felt support from teachers, professors. and so on. I would say that my first big challenge came when I was a new professor here in the Department of Mathematics. I was hired as the first member of a research group on discrete mathematics. So there was not a single professor in my research area before. In other words, I was alone in my research area. At that time, there were two female professors in the department. One was more senior and not somebody who was easy to approach. Another one was younger, just a couple of years more senior than I, and she was on maternity leave. There was another female professor hired a year after who also went on maternity leave. And I went on maternity leave a few years later. So in other words, we didn't actually get to see each other at all. I did not have anybody to turn to in terms of research area. There was nobody, no female mathematicians and female colleagues that I could turn to. And so those first few years were extremely lonely. Yes, it was a steep learning curve, but in terms of gaining confidence in terms of the work that I was doing, that took many, many years. So I think that was my major challenge. We had a wonderful chair of the department when I arrived there, but I don't think he understood the needs of a new faculty member who didn't have anybody to turn to. I have explicitly asked him to assign me a mentor so that I would be comfortable to go to somebody and ask for help. And he said, well, we don't do this here. We just let everybody choose their own friends. Not realizing that, I was isolated. I did not have a person to go to that would kind of feel natural. So yeah, those first few years were quite challenging. Fortunately, things got a little bit better later on. But I think Masoomeh has a lot more to say.
Thank you for sharing. And Masoomeh, would you like to go ahead next?
I should start with living as a refugee. It's always hard, not only in Iran, but also all over the world. That means you are being forced to leave your country, leave your entire life behind and start over a new life in a new environment and adjust yourself to the new environment. So my parents faced all those challenges. So at that time when we left my country, I was only a child. And my parents left because of having a better life and provide a good education for their children. It was during the civil war that Taliban took the control of part of Afghanistan. So many Afghans moved to Iran, which was like the neighbor country. And from the time that we entered Iran until getting a legal status, it took several years. So during those years, since we didn't have a legal status, so we were not allowed to register to public schools. It is why a group of educated Afghan people created self-governing schools, and we did part of our elementary school there. Once I got their legal status, so I registered to school and later on to the university. But for the university, once I got admission to the university, I had to change my status from refugee to international student. It was a policy for all students who wanted to enter university. So from that time, I changed my status. So for this, I traveled to my country, getting visa, passport, and all those things again, doing the work. And so then I treated as an international student. So here in Canada, I had to pay the tuition fee, though I lived all my life there. But still, I needed to pay the tuition fee. I had a great mentor there, in my undergrad, who was who really encouraged me to continue my education. But after that, I decided to continue my education and go abroad because I needed to pay a high tuition fee for my master, or even if I wanted to continue PhD, the tuition fee was really high for me and I couldn't afford it. So I decided to start studying English and applying for other countries like Canada and USA. So at that time, in 2017, I contacted my Professor Šajna in order to see whether she has any opening in her group research. And at that time, I think the problem again was the high tuition fee for international students in master. And since I was living in Iran, I couldn't provide any scholarship from my country because I was not like in my country, Afghanistan. And also I was living in Iran as an international student. So I couldn't like benefit neither from Iran nor Afghanistan to like get any scholarship. So my supervisor started searching to find any resources which can help me for the financial support. So I think it was all her support, like doing like my tax project and other resources to provide the full financial support. Once I got the admission, the next biggest challenge for me was getting the Canadian visa. So it was really hard since there isn't any visa application center of Canada in Afghanistan or Iran. So that means I had to go to other country for biometric and other like paperwork. And it was hard since like going to other country, I needed to take visa. And at that time, I contacted several embassy in order to get visa, but they didn't accept me. They said that you need like invitation letter in order to get visa. I said that I just need to go there only for biometric. So I think it was at some point I lost my hope that I cannot go to other country and I cannot like get Canadian visa. But I felt that it's too late to give up because I went through all the process to get admission. My professor like worked on the financial resources to provide me with financial support. So I continue my search to find a way. So finally, I come up with the idea that I can get like Indian visa. So I like applied for Indian visa. It took several weeks, but finally I got it. And the next challenge was like traveling alone to India. I've never traveled alone before. So I was living in a family or in a custom or tradition that girls are always dependent to their family. When they are in the family, they are dependent to their fathers. When they get married, they are dependent on their like husbands. So that means I've never traveled alone, even like in the city from one city to other city. I was always with my family member or some of my friends. It was like very stressful. My family and I were so much stressed out, and but I had to go through it. It was the only way that I could like get Canada visa. But it was I traveled alone, and after traveling, everything was fine. After like traveling to India, it was the first time I felt I'm strong enough and I can do something alone. I feel like self-confident. And it was the first time maybe I felt that I am an independent here. And it was a great experience because later on, my traveling to Canada was much more easier because already I had the experience of traveling. And it was like all the challenges, like the main part of the challenges that I faced. And I'm really happy that I could go through it. And now I'm here and enjoying like researching under the supervision of Professor Šajna.
Wow, thank you for sharing all of your diverse journeys. That was so inspiring and interesting to hear from all of you. And I just had a question. So we're discussing about equity, diversity, and inclusion on this panel right now, but do you think that these barriers still exist for scientists and researchers in the present life today? And if so, why do you think these barriers still exist? So the challenges that you all mentioned, do you think that they are still present in current society? And Dr. Camacho, do you want to start us off?
Thank you. Yes, I think that although there is a lot of awareness, there has been different efforts to advocate the different challenges that women have to face in STEM careers, even outside of STEM. A lot of women still face all these challenges and a different, as Masoomeh mentioned, at different levels from their own country to be able to get the visa out when they come here, when they start university, as the Dr. Masanya said as well, when they become faculties, they're at different levels and we can see it every day. And unfortunately, the change has been very little. And what I think is because the actions are little, are so dispersed that they have not been able to make like a consistent or coherent movement. For example, there are actions now to be able for scientists to collect data of the impact and mental health, even in the workplace as well, how to make policies to advance these challenges that we may have to face. But to do the science, have to obtain the data is not to make the decision per se. It has to be, this data has to be showed or shared with the policymakers sitting at the table to be able to analyze all these factors, all this data to be able to promote and to do strategies to advance. And I think that this is what has been very challenging, or I see that it needs to be stronger, is that connection between research, scientists, and policymakers or sitting in the table and to be able not to only to discuss, but to move it forward, to be able to provoke changes at the institutional level in the university, where there is a bias, stereotypes, and different systemic barriers that we may have to face to increase and to grow a little bit in this part. So I think that my big concern is that policymakers and decision makers has to be sitting on the table with the research, analyze the data, and to make actions to be able to see a change in a coherent and consistent manner, at least across the country.
Yeah, certainly that action and to bring change at a systemic level. And Dr. Šajna, you mentioned in your answer before that sense of isolation for that you felt as a female researcher in your faculty. Do you mind expanding on that more and how you think we can change that sort of isolation for female researchers?
Yes, I certainly agree with Dr. Edna-Matta Camacho about the data and the numbers that we have to look at. The numbers speak for themselves, right? I think some numbers have improved greatly, but some have not. And there's certainly one aspect there to just improve the numbers, to break out of this vicious cycle of underrepresented groups not being there and not being able to change the social fabric. I would perhaps point out that we are emerging from thousands of years of oppression of women, right? And other groups. So oppression that's based on people who are different in some way, different skin color, different religion, different gender, different sexual orientation, all of that. We have this, I think, somehow very unconscious way of fearing those who are different. And from the fear comes the repression of everybody that's different, and discrimination of minorities. And on the other hand is this tendency that we humans have of viewing those, so for those who have, to view those who have not as a threat to what they have, right? As if there isn't not enough human rights for everybody in the world. How can that be, right? There's no limit on that. So these are some tendencies that we humans have, and that are thousands of years old. There are, I would even say, so pervasive almost in our genes, that are really hard to break out of. I think it might even be foolish to expect that in just a few decades we could overcome these unconscious things. There are now tests that one can take to see their own unconscious bias. And I took one of those tests a couple of years ago, and I was appalled to find out that I have a moderate unconscious bias towards connecting science with maleness. How can that be? I'm a woman doing math, and, even growing up, I did not actually feel that I shouldn't be doing math or science. So where does this come from? This must be, generations of social programming that is really so entrenched in us. And it will take longer to do. I think it will take generations to get over the unconscious bias. We're just starting to become aware of these kinds of subtle levels of things. And I think there's still a long way to go.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you for sharing that. And Masoomeh, do you have anything you'd like to share as well?
I think like Dr. Camacho and Professor Šajna mentioned the main things. And what I want to say from my perspective, I grew up in a culture that mostly like women are ignored for a long time, and it was mainly male-oriented, the education, the research, and everything. So I myself feel that I don't have enough self-confidence. Like even myself, sometimes I don't have enough self-confidence to consider myself as strong as men. This is why that I feel that, okay, they can do, but I cannot do it. So maybe it takes time that I work on myself and to like increase my self-confidence. Still, sometimes it's like from something from inside, not like others' treatment. Sometimes we need to work each individual towards this diversity or inclusion or to be accepted in the research area as a woman.
Certainly. And do you think your lack of self-confidence, do you think having a mentor or someone that you can look up to, like a leader like Dr. Šajna, helped with that self-confidence?
Yeah, definitely. Like from the time that I came, like my professor just tell me, okay, you can do it. For example, I've never worked as a teaching assistant, and I was like stressed out. I felt that maybe I cannot do it. Like I've never even like be a teaching assistant in my own language. Now I had to do it in English. But just my supervisor said, no, it's easy. You can do it. Then, yeah, it was like, I felt, okay, maybe it is easy and I can do it. I should not take it like really hard. Yeah, it was really stressful at the beginning. But later on, I understood, no, it's not like a very hard work. I can do it. It just needs some practicing.
Certainly. And for Dr. Matta Camacho and Dr. Šajna, did you have any mentors or female mentors that you guys looked up to in your journey? And Dr. Matta Camacho, feel free to.
Okay, thank you. Yes, definitely. And I can relate with Masoomeh a lot because I felt like that when I came to Canada with my learning English, I felt a lot fear that I wasn't capable to do it. At some point I said, no, I'm not going to be able to learn this and to communicate with people. And yes, I have friends and I have mentors that help me to improve my esteem, to say, yes, I can do it. It's as I mentioned, Dr. Šajna, it's not a process that you change one day to the other. It takes time. It takes like proving yourself that you can do it. As Masoomeh said as well, is you do it the first and then you know I can do it, or somebody else tell you to do it. So I have a lot of mentors during my career. For example, when I started in my master, there was this PhD student that she helped me a lot during the process and during the experiments, because that was mostly my challenge when I moved to Mexico. It was no language because it was the same, but the experiments per se, the science per se was very challenging, but she helped me a lot and she gave me her experience, her knowledge, and that helped me to advance faster. And when I came here to Canada, it was the connection with other people, with people that was immigrant like me, but was ahead. And I had challenge as well with the language that was telling me I can do it. Then I believe I could do it. I try, and then I saw I could do it. So that helped me a lot to advance in this field. Yeah.
And yeah, thank you for sharing. And Dr. Šajna, did you have any mentors?
I did not have any female mentors on my way. I finished my bachelor's degree in my home country, Slovenia. And even though I never really felt that I did not belong into my studies as a female student, when I looked back, I realized that I never had a female professor. I had a single female teaching assistant whom I still admire, but she was not a mathematician, she was a physicist. And she was wonderful. When I came to Canada as a graduate student, there was one female professor in the mathematics department that I really looked up to. This is Professor Catherine Heinrich, who actually became the chair of the math department at the time. So I never actually took a course with her, but she was there as, not just an inspiration, but also we knew that she was actually a math prodigy. So she was suddenly somebody to look up to. There was a wonderful thing that she did when I was, during my second year there. Namely, there was a conference at the University of Manitoba, conference in combinatorics, where all invited speakers were female. And so Catherine decided to sponsor all of the female graduate students in combinatorics and take them all to this conference. That made a huge impression on me. So she actually covered all the expenses there were probably about 5 or 6 of us, and we all went to Manitoba to attend this conference. It was really wonderful. But I never actually had my own female mentor. I would have to say, though, that my male mentors were very supportive, so I never had any problems with that.
Wow, that was so interesting to hear all of your journeys, and thank you for sharing those experiences. In fact, our guests today are all leaders who are currently forging new paths to advocate for EDI and are mentors themselves. So I'd like to ask more about the current initiatives that you are engaged in. So my first question is for Dr. Edna-Matta Camacho on your STEM Sin Fronteras, or STEM Without Borders initiative, and that mentorship that you're conducting in Colombia. So do you mind sharing with us more about how that is changing the equity and diversity and inclusion in Colombia and in society?
Yes, thank you. Well, actually, some of the challenges that when I came here to Canada, allow me to see myself that sharing experiences was a very good way to help each other, to help myself and other people to advance in different aspects. And actually, before I move into the STEM Sin Fronteras organization, I would like to speak a little bit about the IWS Network, which is the Immigrant and International Women in Science network that I helped to contribute to create here in Canada. We are now in different cities here in Canada, and because of these challenges that I mentioned, and the sharing experience that actually at the beginning I thought that was a Colombian thing, and then later as I know more women and know women from different countries, I know that this is a women thing, that they like to mentor, that we have this in our nature, in our very passion. It doesn't mean that men don't do it, but I see more often women doing mentorship and advocating for all these different aspects to improve condition for women. That's something that I would like to see as well, is to change my perception that men are all are there to support us too. But with all those different challenges and having this network with different women that have the same passion to share experiences, is that we came together to create this Immigrant and International Women in Science network. What we do is to share our experiences, what our challenges, how we face them from the different angles, from the different perspectives and different countries that are in our network, to be able to provide support, to provide this, let's say, female reference for more women that are perhaps now in the fear that they don't belong and they cannot do it, that to support them and to tell them they can do it. So we face different challenges. We are here and we're going to be able to move forward. No? For instance, here in Canada, from the this is numbers perhaps from 2016, but from the 3 million women, total women that are immigrant, which is more or less the 20% of the female population in Canada, only 5%, and these are numbers from 2006, only 5% are in the natural science or applied sciences. So that's a very low number, although I tell you is from 2006, I think that the number hasn't changed so much. So the representation is very low, and mostly because they come with the degree. They have very well-educated women that come from STEM fields, but when they come here, they cannot enter to the market work, labor work, to at the same level. They can even have to go lower level to work, or sometimes most of them, they have to leave the STEM fields and to work in the different things because of the status that they have when they migrate here to Canada, or because it gets these challenges that they have to face become more a barrier that they cannot advance. So this is something that we saw here in Canada, and that's what we are trying to help each other to connect with different environments, academia, industry, government, to see how we could face these challenges, at the same time to see how we can even advise for different decision makers to improve these challenges or these improve conditions for immigrant women in science here in Canada. Sorry. And because of these challenges is that we have less representation of women in science, and exactly the same that happens in Colombia. In Colombia, women have to face so many challenges, and even the people in the students in the rural areas, they don't even have female reference there. Some of the things that we saw and that it helped us or motivate us to create a STEM in Fronteras was that in the rural areas, in the high school schools, we asked students what they wanted to study in their careers, and most of them, they didn't even know, they didn't even wanted to go to university, because the idea that they have is they finish school and they just go to work somewhere, or they just get married and have kids, and that's mostly what they think is their future. So it was a big awareness for us that we need to increase female representation, female reference in those regions. Education as well, quality education is one of the very difficult things, of very hard things to find in the rural areas. Kids, because the geographical position, they don't have access to infrastructure, to well-funded schools. They have, most of them, they don't even have desks to be able to work, and the resources, books, the basic things, they don't have it. Another thing that we saw was the lack of training or the experience of the teachers to incorporate the differences, the different STEM fields into their education, and to developing their kids this critical and analytical thinking of everything that they learn. They can relate and they can provide solutions for their own community. So this articulation between the education, between the female reference, between the geographical accessibility is deepening the gap, the educational gap and the gender gap in the rural areas. And that's what we wanted to bring. We have programs where we are aiming to increase leadership in girls, doing teamwork, creating teamwork in groups that they do science or innovation projects, where they think what are the needs in the region, and they then think about a solution. And we are trying to build projects now. This is a very beautiful activity that we have. We are trying to build a project now. This is hand by hand with students from the university and professors from the university to bring this project, let's say, alive, including all the scientific method, so kids see that their ideas can go beyond, and that go beyond is an improvement for the communities. We have as well a program that is aiming to increase the female representation, where we bring scientists. At the beginning, it was in situ, in the place in the rural area, but now because of COVID, everything has been changed virtually. But we bring women from Colombia and Latin America, and they show how first their history, how they grew in different regions, as well with lack of resources and accessibility, and they were able to study and go and study university, and now they are applying the knowledge in, for example, we have women speaking about how to develop the COVID-19 vaccine, or how the primers are done, things like that. So they can relate and they can see the potential, what they can go, they can grow and develop. So in this sense, we are trying to increase the female reference in STEM in the rural areas. We are trying to empower teachers there, so because we believe that everything they're gonna learn and everything they know is gonna be transmitted to the students through generations, so we can reach, in that case, sustainability of quality education there. And we are trying as well to have a collaborative environment between the community, the students, and the teachers as a whole, to be able to move forward a little bit this education in the rural areas. So that's mostly what we have been done so far.
Wow, that's amazing. Not mostly, that's Amazing. So much that you're doing it just for those two initiatives. And really to bridge the gap between female representation, you said the importance of like a mentor or that teacher figure that you're trying to empower. So I actually have a question for Professor Šajna. As a professor yourself, you have years of experiencing mentoring other students. So what do you think are the key responsibilities of a professor are to encourage more students from these diverse backgrounds, such as international students like Masoomeh, to pursue careers in STEM?
Well, first of all, I'll have to say that my goal is not directed to increase the representation of women and other underrepresented groups. My goal really is one student at a time to allow them to choose the vocation that they're really passionate about and help them along the way. So not necessarily to bring more women in, but rather to encourage those women who really want to do that, to do it and to help them achieve their goal. So how can we do that? So I think the first thing that I try to do is to be a role model. And I have the feeling that women tend to want to be a little bit more of a well-rounded individuals. They're not so happy to just be narrowly focused in one aspect of life, but rather have a well-rounded life. And that may include having a family and other things. So being a role model then means to show that I'm not only a successful scientist, but also a well-rounded individual, somebody who has a balanced life, and show them that's actually possible. Because I have a feeling that many, perhaps women more than men, might be turned off thinking that being a scientist means just one thing, and that you cannot also be just a normal human being, right? That it takes too much sacrifice. And so I'd like to show that that's not necessarily the case, that one can have a full life and be dedicated to a career in science as well. What else can we do as professors? Well, we can certainly actively seek out students who come from underrepresented groups, keeping in mind that they might be keeping a very low profile, because low self-esteem, I think, is, just a fact, right? When you look around and you don't see people that look like you or think like you, then you tend to think that maybe you don't belong there. So I think it's important that we talk about this openly. I have certainly all of my career been plagued by low self-esteem, and it takes, 10 times as many successes to move one step forward in that journey as it would perhaps for somebody who is coming from a different background. So actively searching out and recruiting these students is important. As professors, we also need to be aware of what it means to mentor students with underprivileged backgrounds. It's not just the normal supervision. It really has to be a full mentoring. We need to invest. So typically they will require more financial support, so invest more money. We need to invest more time and more effort, because these students typically need more emotional support. They need more social support. They need more academic support in terms of perhaps having some additional training. For example, in the mathematics department, we are getting international students, and over again, we find that they have a very weak background in one particular area of math, which is algebra. Why is that? Well, there are different approaches to studying mathematics, different focuses. Our department seems to focus really on algebra, and so it's at a very high level. But incoming students don't necessarily have that level of algebra. So something that I would really like to initiate there is to have this additional academic support. A female colleague who is very much involved in EDI somewhere in the States mentioned to me that they accept international students during the summer term, and they have remedial classes. So they identify what sort of areas they have weaknesses in, and then they give additional training in those areas. We have to understand that if there is underprivileged background, there will be holes in the academic preparation of these students, and that we need to somehow fix somewhere along the way. And of course, because professors need to invest so much more into that, we need some kind of a special incentive. It is hard to do it for our personal satisfaction only, when we know that somewhere along the way we'll be evaluated on perhaps the number of students that we supervise rather than what sort of students we supervise. So this has to be additional incentive and additional support as well, both financial as well as in other terms like additional training and so on. So these are things that professors can do and professors need, and I hope that those things will change in the near future.
Yeah, thank you for sharing like the multi-systemic level of support and bringing to light like how it's not just one person's responsibility to do, it's everyone's responsibility in order to encourage more students. So I have a question for Masoomeh next. Masoomeh, you're the first math and graduate student to work as an intern at Shopify as part of the My Tax Accelerate program. First of all, congratulations. Like, that's really amazing. Can you tell me what it was like to take the lead on this new project? Maybe share your experience on that?
Yes, sure. I think it was a wonderful experience for me. Like working in industry while using your knowledge in math, like gives me the feel of like confidence and being useful. But sometimes in mathematics, you have like pure things and theoretical things. Once you use all this knowledge towards the application, you feel that being useful in some area. And I had the chance to interact with a professional software developer. So it helps me to improve my computer skills and programming. And also there I had access to office space and the like great computers that helped me to like towards my work and study. And also before like start working there, I felt like such a company might be like mainly main oriented, because like in my country, working in area of engineering are occupied with men, and mostly this kind of job there are more opportunity for men in this kind of job. But there my supervisors were female, and other employee came from different countries, and we had inclusive workplace. And yeah, it was really great.
Yeah, perfect. So bringing it back to what you mentioned earlier about the tuition fees for international students, I had a question for Dr. Edna-Matta Camacho and Dr. Šajna. As professors yourself, what resources would you like to see be made more available to improve these funding opportunities for these international students who might want to pursue a career in Canada? And Dr. Šajna, would you like to go ahead?
Sure, thank you. So the first thing that I'd like to point out is that some provinces in Canada do not have differential tuition fees for foreign students. I myself benefited from that. I went to graduate school at Simon Fraser University in BC, so I was paying the same tuition fees as Canadian students. Without that, I would not have been able to do it. So I very much wish that Ontario would follow that role model and also have the same tuition fees for international students. Now, the University of Ottawa abolished the differential tuition fees for PhD students very recently, and I very much applaud the administration for doing that. That's certainly a step in the right direction. I do wish they would do it for master's students as well. And let me tell anybody who wishes to hear that why. For us professors, it is actually very risky to accept an international student right at the PhD level. It is a big investment of time and also financial investment. A PhD studies will take at least 4 years. So if we find out that, for example, the students do not have sufficient background, or there's a mismatch between the student and the professor, it could be just a thing of communication or character, that's a lot of an investment lost from both sides, actually. I think we would have a much greater success with these students if we already get them at the master's level. At that level, we can first of all figure out whether there's a good match to continuing to the PhD level. And also, we would have a chance, much greater chance, for any remedial training that these students need. And eventually, it does show up they need something for sure. For example, it could just be something about communicating in science, science writing. It's a very cultural thing, I'm finding. So students from different cultural backgrounds may just not have the same kind of skills for scientific writing. So that's something that needs to be addressed at some point during their studies. And I think the earlier we get these students, the better it would be. So at this point, in differential tuition fees for master students are just forbiddingly high. That's it's almost impossible to accept an international student. I would suggest to any administrator out there to introduce a scholarship for EDI groups. So we have scholarships for Francophone students. Why not generally for students from underrepresented groups? I think that would go a long way to increase their representation. And finally, something that applies to Masoomeh and maybe others as well. So Canada has something like a tuition exemption for refugees, but only refugees who have a refugee status in Canada. So as you know, Masoomeh had a refugee status in Iran, but as we know, she did not benefit from it. In fact, quite the opposite, right? She was actually discriminated against because of that. And so she fell through the cracks. She does not have it here in Canada, and she's not getting any benefit from it anywhere else. So why not extend this to all refugees, not just those that have this specific status in Canada? I think that would be very, very helpful and a step in the right direction of increasing the representation of these groups of students with underprivileged background.
Yes, I second Dr. Šajna, because I think that, well, for example, when I started, I came as an international student as well. I was lucky that my supervisor had a running grant that was able to cover my tuition fees plus some of my expenses to live here. But it was very, very expensive, almost everything, like 80% covered just tuition fees. It was very expensive. Only until I got residency, I was able to pay as Canadians. And I was living in Quebec, in Montreal. Here in Ottawa, I just have 2 years. You have been living here 2 years in Ottawa, and in Carleton University as well. There are some help for master students, but I think that. As Dr. Šajna said, I think that it's very important to increase the fellowships and the scholarships for international students, and especially those that have special needs. And of course, they come from other country. But some of them have the resources, but some others they don't. I think that it would be important to evaluate this, to include this in consideration when the fees for this specific career is applied. So I think that I definitely support what Dr. Šajna said, and I agree with that. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you for sharing. And for Masoomeh, as an international student yourself, what were some of the resources that you found helpful, like adjusting here to Canada? Do you mind sharing those?
For me, like the main support was my supervisor, like her financial support and her funding, and also even the MyTex project had been approved before I came to Canada. So because we wanted to make sure that we have enough money to cover the tuition fee and cost of living. But as Professor Šajna mentioned, so for master student, we don't have actually any resources to cover some part of tuition fee or whatever. For PhD student, yes, like we have some scholarship that cover the tuition fee, But for master, it's not. And the tuition fee is really high and it's really hard to afford. Yeah, I wish they also apply the tuition fee exemption for master students. It would be really helpful. And many students wish to start, being international student, wish to start their education from master level. Because as Professor Šajna said, because they sometimes feel that PhD level is really something long way that you should go through it, and it needs time and effort. So starting at the level of master give you somehow a view that whether you can go further or not. And yeah, I really appreciate that Professor Šajna pointed out all those things that I wanted to mention.
Certainly. And apart from that master's exemption level fee, is there anything else that you wish was available for you but wasn't currently and you wish could change in the future for international students?
It's only the tuition fee exemption. I hope that we could pay the same as domestic student. And also I wish universities consider special funding or scholarship for at least refugee students who have refugee status in other country. So for example, in Iran, since for a long time I was living there as a refugee, but once I wanted to enter university, I changed my status to international. That means I had to pay tuition fee. So there weren't any scholarship available to me. And since for a long time I left my country, also I couldn't benefit from scholarship in my country. Sometimes it seems that for a long time, this refugee student has been ignored and so not benefiting from anywhere. So I wish Canada also consider these special cases or provide some scholarship for those. I know friends who were really talented, but at some point they stopped even the education because of the financial difficulty.
Oh yeah, Dr.
If I may, I would like to add, due to the challenge that I have to face and that I see a lot of women from Colombia, let's say, or from Latin America have been facing, I think that it's important perhaps if they offer integration, cultural integration programs or language advancing programs. So in that case, that challenge from international students that they somehow come to this new environment, to this new country, perhaps with this challenge of the language, they have an easier transition. I think that could be a very helpful thing that universities could have.
Yeah, certainly. And I think that's a great note to ask our final question on. You all have mentioned the various challenges that you faced to get where you are today, and also what you wish that you would have had during your journey. So I would like to ask, moving forward, what changes would you like to see in the STEM fields over the next few years to make it more inclusive? I know we've already mentioned the tuition fees that you would like to change, but what else do you want to see be changed? It could be on a multi-systemic level. And we can start with Dr. Šajna.
Sure, thank you. So I'll speak from the perspective of a supervisor, right? Graduate student supervisor. This is the place where I feel that I can do something to bring more underrepresented groups into mathematics in particular. So funding, of course, is the first one. Without funding, we can't do anything. I've also mentioned making a better incentive for professors to invest into underrepresented groups or students from underrepresented groups. I would also like to see some additional training for supervisors, because as I found just working with Masoomeh, there is so much more that a supervisor has to be to these students, really a mentor, somebody who helps with social and emotional support and just day-to-day really practical things, right, Masoomeh? So we've seen that. And I think it's a little bit too much to expect that all the professors would do that or want to do that. So additional training and then also additional support. I think we need to take the burden off the supervisors in some way. And for that, and on a related note, I'd say we need to, I think, minimize the dependence that these students have on their supervisors. So I think it would be helpful if they did not depend on supervisors quite so directly for all of these things: financial support, social support, emotional support, and so on, because that creates a situation where too much dependence can easily lend itself to some kind of abusive situation. And that's a place where we don't want to go. It's too much of a burden for professors, and it could be risky for both parties. So more support for professors, and of course, more support for students from other sources. So social, emotional support, other resources, just helping with funding, with getting integrated into the society, with language training, all of these kinds of things. So, and then, of course, as I mentioned before, more academic support for these students as well, because inevitably during the course of their studies, we find that there are areas where they have missed something. And so additional remedial courses in scientific writing and so on. I think that would all go a long way to help them bring to the same level as students who had the kind of the normal privileged background would be. So that's my hope for the future.
Thank you for sharing. And Dr. Matta Camacho, would you like to go ahead?
Thank you. Yes, well, I would like to see more women at high-level positions, specifically in academic environments. From my perspective, education is key, and I am so happy to be today with Dr. Šajna and with Masoomeh, because you are the example of what I'm thinking of. Of course, that is based on many information, but it is that if we have teachers or professors, as Dr. Šajna, that promote that women get the best of themselves, that value their abilities, their skills, they grow along with this thinking in the education. We are promoting leaders. We are promoting women that are empowered, that they know what they are able to, and they go for it, and they will go beyond. And at the same time, perhaps they will be able to help the people that comes behind them, the new immigrant that is coming, or the new women in science that is coming, because we know that this is the way how we push our gender or ourselves towards this direction. So I definitely would like to see more women in academic position, in high-level academic position, more professors, faculty, professors, to be able to empower and to provide more opportunities for women. We are mentors for nature, because for so many reasons we are many in nature, for nature, and this, from my perspective, it will provoke a chain reactions. Is the thing that with a little bit of push we will be able to advance. Of course, it requires a lot of input as well, and funding resources, and more support to the professors and to the teachers to be able to fully provide opportunity for their students. But that's definitely the change that I would like to see.
Perfect, thank you. And Masoomeh, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yes, I hope that they provide more funding for international students, especially women, to come to STEM, or put more academic position for female graduate students, in STEM. And also with interaction with other students, I felt like students who are grow up in Western country, they have more self-confidence. They easily go through taking a position or doing something. But for me, I always hesitate. Can I do it? I didn't want to go, okay, I can learn something, so I should do. The first thing that I ask myself, can I do it? No, maybe I'm not eligible, or I cannot do it. So I think some mentoring that help those students who comes from this kind of background, to help them to improve their self-confidence. This is what I hope happen.
Yeah, well, that's a great note to end off with. And thank you all for our guests for joining us today and discussing on such an important topic. And I'm certain that our viewers have been left so inspired by all the work you are doing to spearhead this change in our community, and not just individually, but your initiatives like Dr. Matta Camacho, your STEM Scene Fronteras, and Dr. Šajna, your work as a supervisor, and Masoomeh, you're spearheading your new pathway in Canada as an international student. So I would like to give a big thank you for all joining here today. And I'd also like to give a big thank you to Hallie, Arnott, and Janïs Pettit for their contribution in organizing this panel. And on behalf of our director, Dr. Emilio Alarcon, and the whole BEaTS Research Radio team, we thank you all for tuning in. And you can find us on Twitter, Spotify, or YouTube. And we hope to see you all again.